and howl about America and democracy. There is no America. There is no democracy. We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies. The world is a college of corporations, inexorably determined by the immutable bylaws of business. The world is a business. And I have chosen you to preach this evangel.
For all my free market healthcare robbing, stock stealing, retirement fund fucking with niggas. Fuck you little credit card scamming, jewelry stealing, crack selling, liquor store robbing motherfuckers. Shout to the homies, Carnegie, OG, Willie Randolph Hearst, Baruch, Rockefeller, the real Rockefeller, my main bitch Leona, pour out a little Louis XIII, Scott Rothstein, Jack Abramoff, hold your head, my shop niggas, let's get this money. I spend my day pepping America overseas, pension for the workers, nigga please, embezzlement, etiquette, private settlement, I'm better with Confederate rhetoric from my mansion in Connecticut, foreclosed with big homes out the tenement, I twist words like a speech impediment, I hope you got good credit bitch, if not better get a new job with benefits, while I play golf with niggas to get cheddar with, new money buys brand new carrots, my old money bunch of great grandparents, you got grills in your mouth, I ain't mad at ya, I own every gold mine in South Africa. Thanks, baby, you made me $1 billion. Plus, I own a building, but each one of my children's children.
And we are live. Welcome to UCY Radio. This is Voice of Rebellion Radio. I am back from the third world, and not necessarily a good thing. I'm not saying like I'm super excited about it, but in some ways I am. Being back in the steady Wi-Fi is a good thing because I know there was a lot of troubles for the last 4 weeks. Mainly, what I guess I'm happy about is that is that I get a good chance now to really focus on this on some really good shows in the next couple weeks. I can't guarantee anything about next Sunday, but I think a lot of people, and I'm just going to give a hint, a lot of people in the anonymous, close followers to the Million Mask March movement, and I would say the true anonymous followers, not the people who just put on a mask when they saw the V for Vendetta movie, will be very happy with next week's show if it goes the way it is. That's why I'm not going to say exactly what's going on next week, because I don't want to confirm anything without it actually happening. So, anyways, we're talking about, it is not exactly a great day when it comes to what this day represents, November 22nd. We're talking now 52 years removed, so I know it has been a long time. But that's, in a way, this was the start of 52 years ago of one of the, it was an infamous day, as what many people say, the last democratic leader of the United States, or the last real president that wasn't owned by special interests, wasn't owned by the banks, was killed at Dealey Plaza around 12:30 p.m. p.m. Central Time by, and this is where it gets tricky. Of course, we know the fable, as I call it, because only 30% of this country actually believes the official story of Oswald, lone shooter, magic bullet, and all that stuff. And that 30% better be pretty pathetic of themselves to actually believe at this point that Oswald actually did it. It's the science. There's been so much. Even practically our TVs at this point kind of admit that it couldn't have just been Oswald. I've seen desperate attempts, but if you actually believe those desperate attempts, you don't understand science. For example, a bullet cannot make turns in the air. Bullets don't do that. They go in one straight direction unless they ricochet. And apparently, this bullet made all kinds of turns through people. When this is the second shot, the one that went through Kennedy's throat. Then it goes down through his arm. Leaves his elbow. I think it hits him in the thigh. Leaves the thigh, hits the seat, goes through the seat. Remember that at this point, the bullet should have already been lodged somewhere, probably in his thigh, I would say. I'm not a sniper, I don't use firearms too often, so I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly what that bullet would do in normal circumstances. But I know for a fact, with all the footage of war, that I've gotten glances of, and just knowledge of firearms I've gotten from other people, including my own father, who was a graduated sniper. And just to make it clear again, is that he's on our side. He's pretty aware. But I don't like to get into too much specifics. I don't like to get family members that don't really want they don't want to have that kind of fear, knowing if they consider me kind of a little bit reckless for doing this whole radio show. I can see why there's that fear. It's just I'm not adult yet. Is what I don't feel like I have as much to lose as somebody that has has a lot, has all the stuff a normal adult has, a house and a family and all that. It probably is a little bit scarier for the people who do radio that are like that. But anyways, that's good off topic. There is that the bullet then goes through the seat. Governor Connolly from Texas, is the governor of Texas, is in the front seat. It goes, I believe, through one of his wrists, his other wrist. It goes through one of his thighs and it lands on the floor, still intact. That's the magic bullet for you, which obviously is it's obviously it's obviously a whitewash, the whole JFK commission that dealt with the assassination. And there was definitely multiple shooters involved. That's accepted at this point. Everybody figures that practically. And anybody that's aware knows that those multiple shooters do not belong to any lone group, and most likely not the Soviet Union or Cuba, like some people, there's even the government. I mean, John Kerry was trying to say, oh yeah, it might have been the Soviets or the Cubans. No, that's not really true. I can see a little bit of credit on a awakened side of the Soviet Union doing it, because they kind of did the same thing to their own leader. So they didn't kill him; they just forced his resignation very quickly because he was against the Cold War, and he was in a hardline. He wasn't a hardline Stalinist practically. He was against all that. I think Khrushchev was removed from power in the Soviet Union possibly because of the fact that he was against the Soviet establishment in general, and that's why he had such a short time and kind of fell into disgrace. It was because of that. But anyways, it wasn't. I don't believe there was any evidence that they were involved, but there was a whole lot of evidence that yes, Cubans were involved, but it was not Castro. Castro would actually have absolutely zero motive for it when you actually look at the facts. If he was going to do an assassination, he would have taken out maybe the Dulles, or I think Dulles was the CIA director. They would have more motive to take out, but no, they wouldn't have any motive to take out JFK. And I think that, and why would that be? Is because JFK actually was against the American establishment's general support for the war, for the war against Castro in Cuba. He was generally against that, and of course he went against Operation Northwoods, which was a plan to make a false flag event in order to justify a war on Cuba. The Operation Northwoods was drawn up by the CIA. They were going to shoot down a plane in the Gulf of Mexico, blame it on the Cuban government, and after that they would invade Cuba. So I think that, and they tried to do with the Bay of Pigs invasion, but JFK, if you really look at the records, he wasn't the mastermind of Bay of Pigs. The Bay of Pigs was the masterminds of all the people around him. And this is right here where we start talking about, the thing that ended up with JFK is that he had people all around him, because he was the only one really against establishment. He hadn't cleared house. He wasn't like Andrew Jackson, who cleared house and put all his friends in power, and took out all the other banker puppets and all that were in the government before him, and that's why he wasn't killed probably. he had 2 assassination attempts on his life, but he didn't die in the long run until he's an old man. No, JFK was killed partially because of the fact he didn't take out all these people that were banker puppets, on all these people that were leftovers from what essentially at the time was the neo-fascist government of the United States. I mean, let's look at the facts. I mean, there was Adolf Husinger during that time, was the NATO chief of staff, a position that is in Washington, D.C., and is almost more powerful than any military position in the United States military, because as NATO chief of staff, you have the power to pretty much bring together all the Western militaries that are NATO, which is pretty much all the Western world, as you think of it, West Europe, United States. And Adolf Husinger, the Nazi chief of staff under Hitler, got that position. And let's also look at the CIA. Their first operation was Operation Paperclip. Operation Paperclip was literally to bring Nazis to the United States to work under the United States government. So you're looking at government surrounded by Nazis, and then on the other end, which, as we know nowadays, there's not really, it looks like polar opposite, Zionist and Nazis, but their tactics are the same, and they've actually had history working together during the early times of Nazi Germany, and even in way later, after there had already a lot of stuff that went down, in both Israel and Nazi Germany, they worked together before and after, before Nazi Germany, after now, because look at it, the neo-Nazis in Ukraine are funded by Israel. So on the other end, there was a lot of Zionists in the American government at the time, and of course there's even more now, but JFK was not a Zionist by any means. He was actually against Israel. He was against Israel obtaining nuclear weapons, because he realized that nuclear Israel meant a Middle East that would forever be in war. There'd be no peace. It really, I think he ultimately believed that in Israel was a threat to, world peace, and of course a threat to peace in the Middle East. He acknowledged that even. He had a very cold relationship with Israel. I think he pretended, it's kind of like how Putin and Israel are today. I mean, they talk every now and then, but when you see them talk, you see there's absolutely no connection, that honestly they hate each other. And that's what they both are saying. They hate each other, the cold faces on their, that they have. No friendship whatsoever between the leaders. That's what JFK had with Israel. And, so he was very strong against the Nazis, of course, because I think his brother actually died fighting Nazism, and JFK himself was a World War II vet, but he was not in the European theater. He was in the Pacific theater, where, there's a whole tale of him saving the life of a sailor in the water. So he's actually a war vet too. So of course, war vets, are usually 97% of the time have seen war, and because of that, 97% of the time I'm talking about, they know the ugliness of war, and that's why they are opposed war. 97% of the time I've known. I don't think I've seen really one, that I personally spent much time talking to, that was pro-war, that came back from any kind of war, Vietnam, Iraq, whatever. Of course, Florida, there's a lot of vets. I mean, this is where a lot of them retire to. Now, usually when we talk about retired vets, I'll be talking about, at this point, more Vietnam. And talking about Vietnam, JFK wanted to pull out of Vietnam. And, there was just a few advisors had been sent, but he wanted, pretty much forced upon by people around him, the top levels of the United States military, but he himself did not like the idea of an engagement in Vietnam. And that's why, the military-industrial complex, of which Eisenhower had warned about, was completely against JFK, and they had a lot of power. And I don't think Eisenhower was separate from the military-industrial complex. I mean, he did a coup in Iran. He had all kinds of things he did, in the 50s towards the Third World and stuff. That were his foreign policy was just as bad as his foreign policy nowadays. But some people like to separate Eisenhower from modern politicians or whatever. Yes, he might have been a little bit more. I I think he was just a little bit more upfront about what he was doing than the leaders nowadays, and not try to hide behind a bunch of buzzwords and stuff like that. I think that today on the 22nd anniversary, or not 22nd, the 52nd anniversary, on the 22nd of November, I think that it's kind of sucked this year, because it seemed, when it was the 50th anniversary, everybody was talking about it, what was the true reason JFK was taken out. People were actually looking this up, and it seemed like there was a lot of awareness brought that day. But it seems like today I've only seen a handful of JFK posts. I think I've seen more anti-Charlie Sheen posts than I've seen JFK posts today. And it's like, it really even, and I just we'll bring this up for a second, is that people in the truth community that are dogging Charlie Sheen for, his personal life and bad decisions he made against his own self. I think we should realize that no person's perfect, and of course he's far from perfect, and he has many vices. But let's remember one thing: many actors are criminals and have done horrible stuff. Let's look at Caitlyn or whatever, Bruce Jenner or whatever the people, are calling him, her nowadays. She's killed somebody, vehicular manslaughter. She's a criminal. But Charlie Sheen, he's just a person with many vices, and the difference between a crime and a vice: a crime hurts other people, a vice hurts yourself. Unfortunately, and Charlie Sheen, he's a 9/11 truther. Let's take anything the media says about him with a grain of salt, because he is a 9/11 truther, and he's been pretty harsh about the whole Hollywood establishment. Now, let's face it, he said some stuff about a producer or whatever that, of course, is going to be called anti-Semitic, and I'm not even going to say the insult on the air because it was pretty dirty. But let's face it, is that that when you see that's the line drawn, because of course in this country, these and all these people have connections. All these producers have connections back to Israel. I'm not talking like every Jewish person in Hollywood has connections back to Israel, but I'm saying most of the producers have connections back to Israel. When you say anything anti-Israel or anti-Semitic or whatever, that could be skewed as anti-Semitic. What Charlie Sheen actually said really was an ad hominem, really, because it didn't have much meaning. It was just something he said angrily to a producer during a dispute, and think about his career, where millions of dollars were at stake or whatever. It's probably even again, not going to say that he's far from humble too. That's where one of his faults. I'm just saying is that again, I'm saying that with the media has reasons. It has, and he's also generally anti-government. I mean, he's challenged the Obama on a few things. I'm saying is that they have reasons to exaggerate and lie a lot about what has happened with him. And going back to the JFK thing is that, I think actually his father, was an activist almost all the way back to that point. And I think that JFK activism about the truth about JFK, it was really strong in the 70s, with all the other protests that were going on, the anti-Vietnam protest and all, it was, everybody could see how it was all connected. And of course, the against cannabis prohibition, the protest against that. There was just a lot more. People were almost in a way had a higher state of awareness at that point, but they just didn't have the tools like we do. That's what sucks, is that in this generation, they don't care, and they have all this information right there at their fingertips. It's so convenient. You can be like I was just a week ago or 2 weeks ago, literally in a mountain in Colombia, out there, actually I was in the valley, out in a country town in Colombia that has, this is the size of maybe like, a little tiny Appalachian town out, out in Tennessee or something like that. But I had connection to the internet, and I was able to still research and watch videos and even do my radio show, practically out in the middle of nowhere. And these people live in big cities and stuff like that, have Wi-Fi at every step of the way. They can go to the mall, they have Wi-Fi. They go to their friend's house, they have Wi-Fi. They're in their house, of course, they have Wi-Fi. They go to their job, they have Wi-Fi. They go down to the Burger King, they have Wi-Fi. You know, it's after that trip, I don't know. It's just like I kind of realized that technology is everywhere, and there's almost no excuses at this point. I get some people don't have internet here in the United States, you know, and that's, you know what, those are the people that the rest of us need to educate. We need to, you know, we should take our initiative, some of us, to try to educate these people about what's really going on in this country, what's going on with our government, to the people that can't get the information. But there's just these people that have way more stuff than me, or, you know, just regular Joes, you know, when it comes to when it comes to internet and just convenience of finding all this stuff, and yet they'd rather just, you know, stay on Facebook and look at cat pics or whatever, or, you know, of course, the classic one, Snapchatting dick pics or whatever, you know, which I'm not saying everybody that does that is wasting their time, but I'm just saying that people waste all their time doing that, and it gets in the way of for them of doing anything important, anything serious. I think that ultimately, you know, I think that I think that that was this, you know, JFK thing. Unfortunately, we're talking about something that happened 52 years ago. And unfortunately, a lot, you know, Americans have a very short memory. So, you know, it's not even with like 9/11. I mean, when you start talking about 9/11 true story, people might say, "Oh yeah, that was 14 years ago." Just, you know, who cares about that? But at the same time, they'll be like, "Never forget 9/11." You know, it'd be so hypocritical. But JFK, I mean, there's literally the people just be like, "Oh yeah, that was 52 years ago. That was, you know, this long ago." But, you know, there's people that are not even that old that remember this clearly. It wasn't that long ago. You know, it's the 52 years is really not that long in the whole scheme of things. You know, in geopolitics, yes, it's a long time because many things have changed in the last 52 years geopolitically. Anyways, yeah, we're about 20 minutes into the show, so we don't have any way to call in. I don't know, maybe you can just leave some notes or whatever on UCY chat. Be respectful. I mean, this is my first show back. I'm a little bit rusty because I haven't been really, you know, I haven't been in a continuous cycle of doing shows, and in a way, I'm just directly adjusting and being back in the United States. I mean, things are a little bit bizarre. It's almost like, you know, for me, it's like being way far north. It's cold tonight here in Florida, kind of. Just the whole landscape, how people are acting, you know, when it's a little bit cold. It just changes everything compared to Colombia, where I was frying. I mean, it was in 100-degree heat. I was doing the radio show in 90-something-degree heat. So if I kind of sounded slow on that one, on that one show I did about Tito, the greatest story, sort of told. By the way, that was archived November 8th. I think that was one of the better shows I've ever done, really. Just by the amount of info and the storytelling I did there. I mean, I just really, you know, it was about Tito and Nasser and the whole non-aligned movement. I really hope that gets around. I really hope it can counter the greatest story never told. You know, because that's another thing. It's like, yeah, you know, I get some of these people's points on that come from that line of thinking. You know, the whole, you know, actually I don't really get their points because they claim to be anti-Zionist and all that, but they support Nazism. You know, they talk about, well, the, you know, Jews and Zionists are put on this pedestal in the United States or whatever, which I actually disagree with that, because if you, you know, of course Zionists are put on a pedestal, but if you're Jewish and you are against Zionism, they'll say you're a self-hating Jew, and they'll almost call you an anti-Semite. They will call you an anti-Semite, won't they? Yeah, I mean, that's not true. It's generalization, and ultimately it's being the thing that they say they're against, which is racism against the Palestinians and the genocide against the Palestinians. Well, they're just replicating that thing with Jews. You know, that's a paradigm right there. It's Nazi Zionist paradigm. They're the same thing practically with the same tactics, and they work together. Because they're both forms of fascism. And not only just forms of fascism, forms of race-based fascism. You know, that's why they work together. They're the same thing practically. They're very close The only thing different is really their marketing strategy, and appeals to different people. But ultimately, it's the same people guiding in different sheep. Yeah, well, this is JFK. Talk about the Israeli angle. That's why I put that in the show description because I want to talk about that because there's been so many shows done about JFK in the truth community. So many. I mean, it would just be cliche at this point. All the stuff I'd be saying would be a bunch of cliches about, JFK. And I don't want to do that. I want to do something unique. I want to do something a little bit different and a little bit edgier. Here's the thing about the Zionists, of course, is that people think that they're only in Israel, they're only causing havoc in Israel, and that anything else might be political influence. No, that's not true. They have intelligence, Mossad. They got spies and assassins in all parts of the world. They have them in South America. They had them and still have them in the United States. There was just a spy released the other day. Pollard was released the other day, and he got a job within days after he was released from prison by Obama. And he was brought here to spy and take secrets. I don't get it. I mean, why would they even waste the time on spying on the U.S. government when they know they have the U.S. government in their pocketbook? But I guess it's really, it's like the undercover boss or whatever. At this point, they have to make sure that they're the people that they're in charge of, they're, are actually doing the agenda of Israel. And actually falling into the T, because you just deviate from the agenda a little bit, and all of a sudden you're in big trouble from the banker bosses. And of course, that's what another thing I want to bring up is that, it's not, Israel's not really at the top of everything. They're not the heads of the New World Order. A lot of the people go back to Israel, and that is like the HQ of the New World Order, also with London. However, the Rothschilds ultimately are probably the most powerful people in the New World Order, and that's why they're dedicated all over the place in Tel Aviv. Yes, I probably agree that, Tel Aviv has probably more power than D.C., just because the fact is that, this is the place where a lot of these bankers live, and, they get the special treatment because of that. Ooh, a little bit tired there. But, I got on a little bit of earlier schedule since going to Columbia. I don't know, now and plus we had kind of a Oktoberfest type deal, even though it's November, we had a kind of Oktoberfest type deal here in Gulfport, and I went around and rode the rides. So of course I'm going to be a little bit tired, but anyways, just keep with my kind of soft voice that I have today, and just follow along with the show. I don't know. I think a lot of you guys have work in the morning, and the people that are outside of school, especially the ones that are from Bogey, close followers that live around me in St. Pete and Gulfport, they're on break this week. So you guys, I guess you could just drink an energy drink and try not to fall asleep to my show tonight, because I am going a little bit slower than normal, and the other people, well, you got a little thing to fall asleep to. And you can get a little bit of JFK information while you're dozing off. And it's I'm not probably going to bring up too much stuff that's actually, well, I'm going to bring up some facts that people don't know, like the Castanedos angle of the assassination. I'm just going to bring up some stuff just for the hell of it. I wanted to bring the show also the fact that, I want to bring to the table the fact that about the hidden Israel. A lot of anti-Zionist activists don't take it far enough. And what I mean by that is they make it seem like Israel is only a problem to Palestine, that they're only an American satellite, which is very wrong thinking to do. And that underestimates the Zionist power extensively, does not talk about the Syrian, how they're behind the Syrian terrorist problem, ISIS, how, they're posturing against Iran, does not bring up their assassinations, false flag that they've done worldwide since 1948, including the Levant affair and the USS Liberty was an attempted false flag that was not successful, and I interviewed those people. That's probably why. I was, after doing all this stuff on the radio, I'll tell you one thing. I guess I'm just because I'm a minor. I'm not on the no-fly list or anything like that apparently because I kind of just cruise through security. Well, no, I didn't cruise through it. I mean, they made me go through the X-ray thing once, but I was going to Columbia. I wasn't going to be a dick about it and just be like, oh no, I'm not going to go through the X-ray thing. That never works out for these people. Those videos and stuff like that's how you get tased or pepper sprayed or something. And that's not a fun way to start off a vacation. And then coming back, I just wanted to get back to my parents or whatever, and just go back to the house and sleep. So I wasn't really trying to get a delay there. But it's, and go back to doing the radio show. I kind of got away from it, during my time in Columbia because I just didn't have the time for it. Well, I didn't have the, in comparison to what I have when I'm, compared to now, where I can just do the radio show every week. I wish I would, and there's another thing, the co-host, I know that, and there's been a lack of co-hosts for the last months, really. There hasn't been CP Libre Dylan in about a month, and I'll explain that as Dylan Wade. I'm going to announce right here on the show. We parted ways mutually. It was not an ugly parting. It was it was classy. We just kind of decided that it wasn't really working out. And he had a lot of inconsistencies caused by family or whatever. And CP Libre, well, he's out right now out in the Gulf of Mexico sailing on vacation, so for the weekend. So I'll just give him let him do that. But grabbing a drink here. Yeah, I may have I've gotten the art a little bit more drawing out the points I have because when you talk about 2 hours solo, you can I don't want to get to the point where I'm just last hour I'm just giving you nothing. I'm just looking up stuff to talk about. I kind of have a set idea before the show what I'm going to talk about, and if it starts to deviate too far from that, it might get to a point where I'm either way off on some tangents or it gets to the point where it just gets to the point where I'm just repeating stuff and talking in circles. I don't want to be talking in circles. That's a really bad way to do radio. But anyways, if anybody wants, I don't know how anybody's going to call in today because I can't host any calls. But anybody could. I mean, if I think you can jump in on Skype or something like that. You could chat with me on Skype, and I'll answer your questions. For the people that know me or UCY Radio on Skype, you can always do that. Talk about JFK a little bit more. Is that there was a Cuban angle, but it was not from Castro. It was right-wing Cubans mad about how JFK did not have a warmongering stance against the Castro government in the Cuban in the country of Cuba in general. And these people, Castañedas was one of the people that wrote in the newspaper. Or actually, there's a picture. There's apparently a video or something like that of them holding up a newspaper, him and his buddy, back in September of '63, saying, "Just wait till November 22nd. We'll have our day with JFK." Now, why would they be saying that? I mean, it made just a happy coincidence or whatever for them, or maybe they actually, had a role of some kind. Because there were so many people that were part of the assassination one way or another. Like I said, is that there was many different collaborators. There were many different conspirators in the in the JFK assassination. There were coming. I mean, there's many theories. There's probably somewhere between 15 to 20 different theories that are pretty popular of what happened. But I kind of a subscriber mostly to the Federal Reserve, because of course JFK had put the executive order 1110, which 1110 would have 1110 was the one to print out silver certificates at the so only the U.S. Treasury would have the authority to do so, and the Federal Reserve would be cut out eventually completely from the printing of our currency, making it official that the state of the United States, no longer a private bank, and the government in the United States would have the authority to print United States currency. And, I think if JFK had been around 5 to 10 more years, I think that the entire government would have been uncorrupted. I think he was moving very fast, and he even said that he wanted to shatter the CIA into pieces over, Bay of Pigs, and just the fact that they were a Nazi organization practically, full with all kinds of former Nazis, full with all kinds of Zionists, and just trash in general. And the CIA wanted him killed, and I also kind of subscribe to that theory that the CIA had a major role in it. I mean, even there's a picture of George H.W. Bush walking out of the Texas School Book Depository, apparently, and it's almost undeniable it's him. And I think it's very possible that they had a role in the CIA, and I think the Federal Reserve, Israel, maybe even Cuban right wing to a little support, or maybe they just cheered it on. All had roles of some kind in the conspiracy to take out JFK. And I think that also, remember the speech, the secret society speech that JFK gave to gave at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in around the same time as the executive order, where he talks about the secret groups and pretty much really when it sounds like he's talking about is the whole New World Order plan. And that was also that of course that was also the speech I think where the special forces of the United States were created, but I think they were created partially. Now of course we know the special forces are used to do just really the ultimate dirty work of the military-industrial complex, but I think at that time they were just for the protection of JFK and the United States, and his friends, and just the United States in general, because he knew that he was going against various powerful powers, the bankers in Israel at that point. And it was going against also really a lot of Western European countries. I mean, he was trying to reconcile with Tito, and he was trying to bring peace, and at least in the Cold War, with Khrushchev. Oof. My bad on that one. That was, I don't know. I think I went to the carnival, got my stomach stirred up. Didn't exactly have the healthiest meal today. So if I have a little bit of a stomach problem, that's just don't blame me on that one. Blame fatty hamburgers and one fatty hamburger, and the rest of the meal wasn't the healthiest either. And also just the positive show. I mean, 2 hours today and 2 hours solo again. I kind of like doing 2 hours solo because I have complete control of what information I put out there, And what I mean by that is that, it doesn't even come into play anymore because I don't have, my co-host. We take turns talking, so it's not like we're battling for time to talk. But I get to get out all the stuff. I never really feel like when I do a solo show that I have much more I want to say. And except that Tito show, of course, because that Tito show, the greatest story sort of told. I just had so much information on that. I was pretty prepared, because I was trying to make it a great show. I think in a way I could have made this a part 2, but it was 2 weeks apart. It would probably work better if I actually had a way to have done it 1 week, next week, do a part 2 of the show. But and this week I had to do the JFK because this is the one time my radio show falls on the anniversary of something like this. when it comes to truthers, I mean, this is one of the major things we talk about. Probably in the top 10 topics. And, of course, it's like having a show fall on 9/11 and not do a show about 9/11 truth. I mean, you almost have to at this point when it falls on the anniversary of JFK. And what's the fact that nobody was really talking about it today? I mean, I didn't see too many of my friends sharing stuff about JFK. Like I said, there seemed to be more stuff about Charlie Sheen in Paris. Which different many angles about Paris, which I won't get too much into. I mean, because I really, honestly, I haven't. I think that there's evidence for a lot of stuff of what may have happened in Paris, but I'll say this at the least, that that the French government, the American government, possibly Israeli government, at least one of the three groups, probably all three groups, had some kind of involvement of making it happen. At the very minimum, actually, because they all supported ISIS. And ISIS attacked. If you actually believe, ISIS it was ISIS that struck. And I heard, accounts apparently by the witnesses that said that clean-shaven white men had came out of the cars and shooting guns. They were coming out of nice cars and they were shooting guns. So there's a possibility that was actually, just government agents that inflicted the bloodbath. I think there was at this point. I definitely think there are real casualties. I think there are real fatalities. But who was it inflicted by? Is the question. What's the in this whole onset of a possibly a World War III right now scenario we're talking about? It just seems like the handwriting's been on the wall for a while now, and it really just seems to have escalated through 2015. We had a very big standoff earlier this year in the Gulf of in the Gulf of Yemen and Oman. During the start of the Yemen war between the Saudi Arabia, the United States supported the Yemen government of Hadi. That's the last name of the leader. And the Houthis, which are supported by Iran, Syria, and they are the legitimate government, popular government, and currently actually in charge of the capital. But Iran was trying to deliver supplies to them, but the United States put up a block of ships and told them if they crossed that line, they might attack. Almost like, in a way, kind of resembling the Cuban Missile Crisis. Of course, eventually, but actually the American ships turned away eventually, and I think the Iranians kind of agreed to not bring just humanitarian supplies. They weren't even bringing weapons. And of course, the United States was made a huge deal about it because it looks like they're just trying to stir up a third world war at this point. As the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan start to come. Well, that doesn't seem like they're coming to a close. They're starting to just because look, Afghanistan 9 more years, and Iraq, they just started. They kind of re-entered with the ISIS narrative of a group they created, and there's still paramilitary left over from the Operation Continuing Freedom. Just the most ironic title ever, really, about the groups that they supported. And what it really was just turning Iraq into a Western colony. And of course, it wasn't actually about democracy. Anybody that thinks that at this point would be a fool. But of course, so let's talk a little bit more. Let's talk a little bit more about the JFK. Let's go back to bring back another point. Is that the Federal Reserve, of course, was probably the main perpetuator, I would think, of the JFK assassination because they're the main vehicle to this day of the America's slavery as a country to the bankers. Because without the Federal Reserve, would we be $18 trillion in debt to the bankers? No. Without the Federal Reserve, would they control our currency? No. The Federal Reserve is the reason why the bankers control our currency, and by controlling our currency, they control our country. I mean, what was the famous quotation by Nathaniel Rothschild, that if you control a country's currency, you control the country. Or what was it? Nathaniel Rothschild said, give me control of a country's currency, and I do not care. I care not who controls her laws." And that's right, and that says everything right there. Because that's right there. That right there, that's their MO. To control the currencies, control the oil, control the food, control. They know they get to the main arteries of the country. And like you said, if you control the country's currency, you control the country. The Rothschilds act like parasites, and once they take over the country, it's not very long before they become the hosts. And of course, and these parasites have taken trillions of dollars away from the planet. And took it away from the poor and the middle classes of the entire world, and now it goes to the very super tiny part of the pyramid that is the Rothschilds. I mean, there's really no better word to call them but parasites. And because of that, we have, two of our days of infamy in the United States have been created by the Rothschilds and the New World Order. The 9/11 JFK, and many more days of infamy. I don't know why I'm using the Pearl Harbor quote, but the days of infamy. Many of them have been, of course, and some of them have just been false flags, drills that have been put on TV and purported as real events. And there's been the real events that have been done, like the Paris. I think that was a real event, and this was just a horrific act of the government sacrificing 150 people in order to justify, because they say this is a horrible terrorist attack, to justify possibly martial law in France, or just a very strict lockdown in the entry of French forces into Syria. And as you see now, it looks like the United States government is going to follow into Syria probably pretty soon, because they already have boots on the ground in Syria. But it looks like the United States government is going to send a large invasion into Syria. Probably, I would say, I think it's still possible, my prediction, that it will happen by the end of 2015. I'm going to stick to that, actually. I think that in the next few weeks, in the wake of the whole Paris events, that they're going to say that, that there's been a, that now there's a need, of course they're going to say, we're going to take out ISIS, but what they're really going to do is what they've been doing from the beginning, has been attacking Assad. And they've actually, ever since the anti-ISIS operation has started, there's been reports of oil reservoirs, oil refineries, food warehouses that forced Syrians to wait in giant lines for food because of the attacks by United States forces on food warehouses. Also another targets belonging to the Syrian government. Even, as I said, is that possibly even small skirmishes have probably happened between Syrian forces and the American forces. It's just kind of a slow escalation towards World War III. And, it's already been slightly a war against Assad for over a year now, but now it's going to be brought into the open, and it's going to be escalated heavily. And then once that happens, Iran, from what I heard, they have in big numbers now forces in Syria. So as soon as war in Syria starts, now we know war with Iran starts, and now it would be World War III. Russia doesn't even have to join in at that point. It would be a region-wide war that could spread into North Africa. It would go all through the Middle East into Central Asia, and just the amount of the amount of casualties in this war. I mean, you think about it, World War II wasn't really all around the world. It was only in there was the Pacific theater and the European theater, but there wasn't war over here in Americas for the most part. And that's why I would think that World War III would most likely be. I don't predict Russia to join in that, because they have a lot of restraint and they have a lot of common sense, and they're not going to start an apocalypse. They're they're and you know, the only way I could see that Russia joining into a world war is if they had somewhat assurance that nuclear weapons wouldn't be used and that they could fight it conventionally and take out the United States before it becomes unconventional, or you know, the point that they've already, you know, they have absolutely no choice. I think that it will happen in the World War I, World War II scenario. A pretty bad war, first war, and the second war horrific. I mean, I think that a war between U.S. and Russia at this point would be the most horrific war we've ever seen. Anyways, again, if you want to leave some comments or something like that, you can leave some comments in Skype, right there in the chat box. We're about 50 minutes into the show. Cold night here on the Eastern Seaboard. As we are talking about JFK, and I think, you know, with JFK in a way prevented really, you know, World War III from. I mean, partially, I think by the fact we had JFK prevented World War III from happening, because I think if it was many different presidents, you know, that were banker puppets, they would have used that opportunity, and they would have used the chaos that was happening at the Cuban Missile Crisis, and they would emerge from the chaos, and with the chaos start a war, start a world war. So that's their most, using chaos to further their agenda. I think, you know, with the Cuban Missile Crisis, they would have, they wouldn't even have to have reached anywhere near the ships that were, you know, off the east coast of Cuba. And I think ultimately, you know, JFK, that was his plan all along. I don't think even if they had crossed, he was going to start a world war. So he was against the whole Cold War in general. He was trying to solve the Cold War, make peace with Khrushchev, and end it, and then make alliances with countries with similar interest to what JFK wanted to, which was to end the New World Order and end, you know, the Zionist control over the Western world. You know, I think JFK would have. He started to make an alliance with Tito, and I think that he would eventually have made a stronger alliance with Tito, and they could have reshaped Europe over the next 10 or 20 years with JFK's new policies. But of course, that none of that happened. JFK was taken out not even 3 years into his presidency, and he already had made a lot of noise. I mean, he practically had ended the Federal Reserve for a short time. 2 days after he died, his program ended, and the Federal Reserve was brought back very shortly after. I mean, effectively, it was brought back in the same year. And then for the last 52 years, the Federal Reserve has, you know, been drawing this country, or, well, 99.99% of this country, more like 99.9999% of this country, you know, towards the sewer, really. You know, they've been drawing this country into poverty, most of this country into poverty, while the very, 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 very top, you know, rich, pretty much the buddies of the Federal Reserve and the Federal Reserve themselves, get very rich, and they keep thriving despite economic depressions. The economic depressions don't affect the super rich; they actually get richer. It's really more of a robbery when economic depressions happen, rather than all across the board everyone's suffering. No, a lot of people are suffering for the thriving of a few super rich corporate heads. And I think that JFK and JFK was also, you know, if he was around 64, he would have stopped the coup in the Congo against Lumumba, or I think it was that year. I think it was 64 was when Lumumba was overthrown. Probably with the help of the United States government under LBJ. You know, and by LBJ and the United States government overthrew Lumumba, and then brought in the very extravagant dictator. And it's the least you could say about that, the one that came after him. I mean, I think he wore like he would like wear like leopard skin and stuff like that, and had these big, they had the classic one like dictator sunglasses. And he was just a horrible dictator that was brought into Zaire, and during the 70s and 80s, thousands and thousands were killed, and it was all in the name of the Cold War. The United States support for Zaire at that time, saying, "Oh yeah, they support, they go against the Soviet Union." In the name of the Cold War, they were able to support the fascist dictatorship that took over in Zaire after Lumumba. I think JFK's policy towards the whole Third World would have been so much different than what happened under Nixon and all the presidents afterwards, as they were banker puppets. With the coups in Chile, with the coups in all throughout South America, and the fascist takeover the fascist takeover had already started, but I think he would have reversed it. And also, I think ultimately, because he wasn't really around when Che started his second campaign of revolutions in the mid-'60s and late 60s, I think that it would have been a whole different attitude towards Che. And, I don't think that the United States would be treating him as the most wanted terrorist on the planet or something like that. I think that ultimately they might even have sat down with the guy, and probably and try to work something out, towards going against these fascist dictatorships. Because there was one thing JFK made clear, was his when he was not even president during the 50s, he was very strongly against, and even early in his presidency, he was very strong. He was supportive of Castro at the beginning, and he was very strong against, more importantly, Fulgencio Batista and these fascists that that killed thousands of people just for being slightly against their ideology and of corporatism and the ideology of the an ideology that disenfranchises 99% of the country. I think that ultimately, I'm on the radio. I think ultimately JFK's whole foreign policy would have went much different. Maybe not so much for I think it would have been much different for most of the planet. I think definitely for South America it would have been completely different, and there wouldn't have been the support by the United States of these fascist dictators. As Pinochet, Stroessner, and the many in support of the fascist dictatorships in Central America, such as the one that took over in Guatemala, a coup that happened just 1 year after 1 year after JFK's death in Guatemala, of a government that took over and started killing natives. In fact, killed over 200,000 natives in a very small country after a gun ban. This is one example right there in Central America of why gun control is brought about by governments to commit genocide. I think that, again, like I said, it's the 90, in this country, 90.999% of the people have suffered since the JFK assassination. And of course, I think JFK. That's the thing. Of course, he went against the elite of the country. I mean, I think that what you could have called JFK's ideals was he was definitely anti-corporatist. He was definitely anti-Stalinist. I think he was definitely he was anti the Soviet way of communism. I think that what it resembles somewhat was almost like how Putin governs Russia nowadays. It's just a pragmatic kind of middle of the road. There's not really, it's not really capitalism. It's not really socialism. It's kind of just uses what works for the country. It was what JFK would have done. He was very pragmatic, and I think JFK would have continued to have been pragmatic had he lived. And people bring up the most silliest bullshit about his personal life. Oh yeah, he enjoyed women or whatever. This is the alpha personality sometimes. Yes, sometimes they're womanized. But guess what? He's actually a leader, not a coward, and not a puppet. That's what's important. What he did in the White House, not what he did with Marilyn Monroe or whatever. You know, it really it's like is people being judgmental when themselves, if they really want, if somebody brought up stuff about their life and all the bad stuff they did, they would say, "Oh, stop being a judgmental asshole." And so that's why I say about the people that judge JFK in that way. You're a judgmental asshole. You know, yeah, sure, it's not right to sleep with many different women when you're married. You know, but that's not important. What's important is that it's really very, very minute by the fact of what he could have done by forever ending the Fed and stopping all these wars, wars of attrition, in across the world by the United States, and changing the foreign policy and finally standing up to the New World Order as a country. But of course, people just want to talk about how he liked to dip his stick in prostitutes or something. That's a rumor. They like to dip his stick in prostitutes in the White House or whatever. It's like, and also, I'll tell you one thing, is from what I've heard about Bill Clinton, in comparison, if people want to compare Bill Clinton to JFK, at least JFK actually liked women. Bill Clinton, we'll just say I've heard before and seen on, I haven't seen really the validity of this, but it looks like that apparently JFK liked underage, not, you can't even call them women. He was taking advantage of practically girls, at least JFK. I mean, by the fact, Marilyn Monroe, she was actually more like 30 years old. That's at that point, that's not even like, the guy that's 30 saw him picking up the 18-year-old chick. That's practically almost another relationship he had. It's mixing. I just want to bring that up because I've heard it brought up so much times, mostly by immature teenagers and stuff like that. They just want to bring that up whenever, to discredit him. Because he's been so discredited in the media, JFK's been shown as they try to make it seem like he was, ultimately a terrible president or whatever, that, but we feel bad that he got killed. No, it's that he was a great president, he was a great man that the elite had killed, and I think the elite almost brags about that they were able to kill him, and lie about this for all these years, and nobody has found, nobody's able to figure out the truth. They almost laugh about the complete gullibility of the sheeple of the United States. And it's like Payday Monsanto says, the last president of the United States right there in the Millionaire Patriots, and that's where he also does it, in there was the Secret Society speech. I wish I had the soundtrack or something like that. I could play the song right now. So everybody can hear the song, because I really like that song, And I don't agree with everything that he has to say when I'm talking about the artist, but, like I've interviewed him before, here's the thing is that we respectfully disagree on some stuff, and that's why I have a lot of respect for him. I actually, it's like, I think I'd almost be creeped out by somebody that agreed 100% of 100% on everything. That's a dude anyways. If it was a dude that was agreeing on 100% of 100% of what it's saying, that would be a little bit creeped out. If it was a woman, especially with like my girlfriend or something like that, that's a little bit different story. Of course, they're gonna a lot of times they just might try to appease you, just hoping you kind of stop talking about that and go talk on to another subject. I think I've had that before. They'll agree on 100% of 100% of all the stuff I'm saying, but not really contributing to the conversation, not really putting anything into the conversation, and just kind of hoping I change the subject or change the subject to whatever. But anyways, I think we're it's like 10:05 right now on the East Coast. All right, 10:05. So we've already went through an hour of the show talking. The hidden Israel. The Israelis have been in so much stuff: false flags, assassinations, kidnappings. What else? Torturing all across the world. Yeah, they've been in Central America, They've been involved in stuff in Cuba. They've been involved in stuff in the United States. They've been involved in stuff definitely in Argentina. I can almost assure you that 1994, whatever, there was that bombing that happened against the synagogue. They try to blame it on the. They try to say the Iranians did it. I can tell you that was definitely, that was a start really of the anti-Iranian rhetoric, very strongly. Where they were trying to say that they will have a nuclear weapon in 6 months. That was around where it started. Actually, it started before that even, but it continued. It got heavy again in the 90s. Netanyahu has been a pusher of that same myth for 25 years, and even back then he was a big pusher of the myth before he was even prime minister. And I think they were behind that bombing in '94 in Argentina. I think that they've had, of course, they've had involvement in helping out fascist governments in South America in the 80s and 90s, helping out fascist governments in Africa in the 80s and 90s, having very strong parts against Gaddafi and governments that were against the New World Order and the bankers and against the Zionists. They've had very big parts in taking those leaders out. They've had, of course, a huge role in the Middle East, creating havoc and war in the Middle East. They've had a huge role against Russia, I think, nowadays. I think that when you see these terror attacks, ultimately you realize that a lot of these terror attacks are done by U.S. Israeli trained forces, these Chechen rebels or whatever that do terror attacks in Russia are helped out by the United States government in Israel. And, again, going way back, LBJ, of course, was a horrible apologist for Israel. We know that talking to the USS Liberty survivors, it's a disgrace what he said. He said, I don't care if every one of the sailors drowns, but I don't want to embarrass Israel. When Israel attacked an American ship, and everybody knew what happened, it was very clear. They pretty much came to the consensus, all the survivors of USS Liberty, that Israel had attacked it not unintentionally, but intentionally, and they were going to blame Egypt for the attack and draw the United States into the Arab-Israeli War of 1967. And it was one of the more serious wars that Israel's got involved in, because there was Nasser, as I said, a great leader, and he finally took a stand against Israel when Israel pushed hard against Egypt. Nasser struck back, and it started a big war where they were the main two participants in the war, and there was a few other Middle Eastern countries, but ultimately they were the two main participants in the war. And we're going to say Egypt had struck the American ship. They was even talking about, back in the United States, about nuking Cairo after that, if that actually had happened. And that, who knows what would happen after that? That could have been easily World War III. I think that it could have been also a lure, possibly to get Tito in the war, because if Egypt is now being strongly attacked by the United States, there's only probably one country that will come to the defense of Egypt in their little pact, the non-aligned movement, that actually could do anything against the United States. That'd be Yugoslavia. Probably Yugoslavia would join in the war. The United States would hope to inflict a lot of harm against the Yugoslavian military, cause a lot of damage, and cause major destruction of the Yugoslavian forces. So that's just a few theories of what I have, of what was the ultimate goal of doing the false flag against the USS Liberty. That's now pretty much agreed that by the survivors, and I take the survivors' accounts over practically anybody's. That was an intentional false flag against Egypt, and and against that ship where 34 sailors or something like that died, hundreds were injured. The Israeli government was literally strafing those sailors while they were in the water. People be like, "Oh, yeah, it was a slight mistake," or people even defend it. It was horrific. And these people that put Israel first against their own country or whatever, but then will call themselves patriots, just baffles me. anybody wants to leave anything in the Skype chat, please do. We're about 1 hour and 10 minutes into the show. We have about 50 more minutes talking about JFK and talk about a lot about Israeli angle, the whole thing. Just talking. I kind of really the JFK show turns into a little bit more of the 1960s and what could have happened if JFK was president, because it's really what's interesting to me in some ways. It's bad to sometimes to do what ifs, but I just want to emphasize how much why he was taken out also, and also I could talk about a little bit more of the whole science and just how it was impossible. But I think almost everybody now has seen so many YouTube videos about it that would be redundant at this point, but not repugnant as the JFK speech goes. I'm not down. There's no way. And I'm not going to do a JFK impression on this show. I could, but I gotta remember the exact lines. Let's see if I can do that just for the hell of it. No, I'm not. I'm just going to keep going on with the show. My Boston accent's not the best. JFK. I think that just being the. It's kind of weird because his father was a bootlegger, and that's how he got that's how the family got the money. But think about it, his father didn't get the money being a corporate head. Didn't get the money working with Zionists, and so he probably, he seemed to he got the money made possibly mafia wise. It could be, but it wasn't. It didn't belong to the factions that had ran, that ran the government and ran the country for the last 50 years prior to JFK. And I think that might be part of the reason why he was able to get to the point he was. I mean, he had the money to be able to go far in life, but he didn't, but he wasn't corrupted in that way by government and corporations, because he wasn't, it wasn't like Donald Trump or something like that grew up with money, or most of these presidential candidates that have grown up with money have always had money. I think that, again, and after JFK, of course, there was a lot of chaos in this country, and that chaos that was brought about, they took control of it. And they brought up LBJ, and afterwards, they had this soft-spoken Texan to bring about the horrible things such as the Vietnam War, and also at the same time, he brought about he brought back the Federal Reserve. And people say, well, he signed the Civil Rights Act, but that wasn't his work. That was just a compromise, really. That it was in my opinion, it was a small compromise for all the stuff that had happened, and JFK ultimately made it happen. LBJ, all he did was sign the paper in 1964, but as we know, JFK was very much for equality of all citizens, very much for the equality of all citizens. Because he believed, unlike the other leaders, that there shouldn't be democracy or freedom, just for the super rich, but for all the Americans. And he lived practically in a way a normal life of an American. He went to World War II. Sure, he grew up with a little bit of money, but probably the money wasn't didn't go too far on the fact that he had like 10 or I think. It was a giant family. I know he had like 10 brothers or something like that. The amount I don't know the exact number, but let's not forget also that he just had a lot of challenges in life. He was sick as a child. Well, he was already an adult about it's the mid 1930s, so he was still you could still say that he was a kid. He was still a child practically, and then he overcame that, and he just had all kinds of health problems in life. I mean, in the 50s, he had Addison's disease, which left him, with much back problems and just overall pain. JFK actually smoked weed legally in the White House during the 1960s. No, and this was actually before Schedule 1. It was already illegal. It had been illegal since 1937. However, it wasn't Schedule 1 yet. So it wasn't yet the same offense as if you were doing heroin or some kind of hallucinogens are also put on Schedule 1. But it would have, but it's he's somebody was that much adverse to be able to do all the stuff he did. And I think that's another thing he realizes that he was just glad to be at that point, have gone to that point with all the stuff he had went through, surviving a world war, that he actually fought in, surviving the world war that he had actually fought in. He had seen some stuff. I mean, he was a Navy PT boat captain, of course, famous boat that he was on, in the heroic actions that he took part in. JFK, his whole just looking at the leader himself, it's like it's really almost like a American Putin, who's looking at himself, looking at what type of personality, what type of man he was. Putin had a whole different upbringing, of course. I mean, he kind of grew up normally, actually, though, without any money, and then he got to the point, through the Soviet military and through the KGB, and then afterwards he kind of sneaked in through Yeltsin. Yeltsin thought that he was a pro-Westerner corporatist. However, he wasn't. And then he went against the New World Order, kicked out the Rothschilds in 2006, put arrest warrants after George Soros, and all the other actions of it, the Ukraine, the Syria, the going against the encroachment by the West, the encroachment of the West by putting missiles all around them and NATO bases all around Russia, and now they're just being demonized. Putin is being treated. It's really there's no other leader that they have given that special treatment, of giving them that much publicity, which I think has backfired a little bit, because right now, the interesting thing is in the polls, they have shown that Putin would win against every candidate in the race, if according to the American opinion about Putin is actually very high right now because of his strong stance against ISIS, and they see what he has done for his country. Putin would win against Trump, would win against Hillary, would win against many different, of course, I say Ben Carson, all that, Jeb Bush. And right now, there's somebody that's sneaking into the polls, and people kind of discounted me for saying this. Marco Rubio. I said that there's a high chance that he will be chosen to win the Republican nomination. I think there's a slight chance that Marco Rubio becomes the next president of the United States, elected by the elite, because he's a Hispanic man. That they're going to say, look at this progress and change we brought about. We have an Hispanic president that is the son of 2 Cuban immigrants. Let's not forget who his parents ran away from. They didn't run away from Castro. They ran away from Fulgencio Batista, who was one of the most brutal fascist dictators in history. And I think that if he becomes into power, it's going to be like the equivalent as if Fulgencio Batista had taken over Washington, D.C. in the 1950s. And JFK was a very strong opponent to Fulgencio Batista in the 1950s in his dictatorship. What he had done, he had sold out 40% of the country to American interests. He took power in 1952 again. He had took power democratically in 1940, and then left after 4 years, and then took power again through a coup in 1952, and then was in power till the 59 revolution. Batista was just despicable during that time. His country was in mass poverty. He had killed thousands of people, and just selling out his country. And then when the revolution happened, and we know that it might have not been to the most desired result, but JFK actually supported Castro at the beginning and kind of took a little bit harder stance later, but it was really never the hard stance that the military establishment wanted. They wanted him to declare war on Cuba because they wanted to do Operation Northwood, shoot down a plane if it took it, to convince the American people that, that Cuba and then possibly the Soviet Union they would start a war with after that. War was needed with these two countries. It's kind of, which is MH17 kind of resembles that. As MH17 was the event that they were almost justifying war with Russia after MH17, even though West Ukraine, with all the evidence and all the different reports, said that bullet holes from fighter jets had taken from the guns off of fighter jets, had shot down the plane. Probably 2 West Ukrainian fighter jets have followed MH17, and it was also in a Malaysian airline again. Which Malaysia is very close to joining BRICS, and they're a very strong defender of Palestine. They have already, in Absentia, have convicted Obama, Bush, and many Israeli war criminals of war crimes, and that's the reason. And I mentioned that they want to join BRICS. They want to leave the Western banking system. That's the true reasons, probably why Malaysian, one went missing, another one gets shot down. And I'll say there was probably a conspiracy with MH370. I think MH370 was probably disappeared by the United States government and probably landed at some Air Force base. And who knows what happened to the passengers? They might have just killed them at the spot. But that plane's probably in a hangar somewhere, probably locked away. I just don't believe a plane could go missing like that. Apparently one did across the Atlantic 10 years ago, but I just have a lot of doubt. And at the time it happened at the same time as all this Crimea and the start of the Ukraine event. And then a couple months later, a plane crashes over Ukraine. I think it was almost like to keep people distracted, because at the very beginning there's all this footage and people would be like, wait a minute, these are neo-Nazi groups taking over West Ukraine. Should the United States government should be supporting them? Should we be rallying behind them? And then later, people did not see all that and stuff. They're like, oh yeah, we should support those West Ukrainian guys. These guys seem cool. They seem to be pro-democracy or whatever, not realizing these people are neo-Nazis. They kill people for just speaking Russian there. They kill people for just being Russian. They kill people for just living in certain parts of Ukraine that they think are pro-Russian. In Lugansk, Donetsk, and many of the other areas surrounding, and into, of course, down by Sevastopol and Crimea. I think Crimea, they lost power because they had their power station. Two power stations were blown up. I don't think it was a coincidence. I think these were attacks, possibly by the West Ukrainian government. Onto Russian territory, because they seem to have no fear. I mean, they're pretty much egging Russia on to start a war with Ukraine. West Ukraine says they're ready to invade Russia. I think they're absolutely insane. But of course, maybe they do know that they would get the backing up of American forces almost immediately. I mean, just think how much difference this world has came to, has went from the time of JFK, when he tried all that he could and succeeded to stop war with the Soviet Union. A much more, it's not a much more. It's the difference between a malignant enemy. I would say, I mean, it was an enemy. The Soviet government, you could probably say, was an enemy to the Soviet people and into the peace in general. So they acted very imperialistic and Stalinistic. Compared to Putin, a guy that's a person of reason, pragmatic, and a person that a person that took a stand against the New World Order, took a stand against the bankers. It's completely flipped. And now the United States government are the imperialistic enemy of most of the world's people hates them because of what they have done to so many different countries, bombing a fascist empire where corporations and the government are. The line is so blurred. It's literally the definition of fascism. However, very few of the people actually want to admit it. I think it's ultimately they just don't want to admit it. They don't want to believe it, but they know that it's the truth, that the American government's fascist. When you start talking about it with people, and if they really feel comfortable with you, maybe they might actually admit it, but they just don't want to believe it because it puts them in a reality they don't want to live in. And this is one of the main problems with Americans, is that the information's there. They will even acknowledge it to a slight extent that that's how it is, yes, but they don't want to fully acknowledge it in their brain because they believe that they just believe it's the other way. It might actually be the other way, and then they can live in peace. However, you cannot live in peace by living a lie and by lying to yourself about what the United States really is. It's only until you acknowledge what it is and acknowledge that we need to fight it, what the United States government has become, is the only way they can live in peace with yourself, I think. Anyways, if anybody wants to leave something in the chat room, anybody wants to, anybody want, I don't want to go to the UC Live chat right now. At the second, or maybe I'll go. Maybe next show, figure out a way to just conveniently go back and forth between this and the UCY chat room. But today, just go to Skype. Go to UCY Radio. Leave your comments there. May suggest us and talk about or whatever. May question you have, question on my opinions or whatever. I mean, this is what a lot of the shows could be. Or is opinions and just kind of speculation of what it might have, how things might have went different. I think it's a little bit fun to see just to think how things could have went different. And it may just use it as future guidance. I don't think that they'll ever let another JFK through. They don't want to go through the whole trouble and let them have where he actually reversed probably the agenda by possibly 10 years, I would say, in just the 2 or 3 years that he was in power. Well, it was actually, he was in power for 2 years and about 9 months-ish. It would be actually 10 months. 2 years, 10 months, JFK was in power. And 2 days, I don't know what's going on with my Skype here. I just went on black screen for a second, sorry. Just in that time, the Federal Reserve had already been ended. He was already planning to pull out of Vietnam. He was already, he was already planning to end the CIA. The FBI, of course, hated him as well because, he was for civil rights. And being for civil rights was equal to being for communism in the eyes of the racist Edgar J. Hoover. Which Edgar J. Hoover, I mean, let's talk a little bit of smack about him. He was completely paranoid. Had files on everybody. He was a workaholic. Probably a workaholic because he wasn't out chasing chicks, definitely, from what I've heard. Because apparently, he had a very fond male friend. So I'm not saying anything bad about gays in general or homosexuals in general, but but for Edgar Hoover, sure, why not? Let's just talk a little bit funny about this route. I mean, he just happened to go on vacation with this guy every year or something like that, and everybody noted how friendly they were with each other, and apparently there was even pictures that the mafia took of them. Also, the little fat boy Edgar Hoover, he sent letters to MLK saying that telling him to kill himself and pretty much threatening his life in a letter, and MLK wasn't even scared by that. wasn't phased, and he continued protesting. And then later he said we'll release footage of and tell everybody about how you are womanized or how you cheated with your wife. And I'm like, well, I don't care. I will explain that away and be honest about it. And it worked out in his favor. See, this is one thing they always, what I've noticed is that they get people on a lot of, if you're ever in a position of power, just be careful who you are, which women you're talking to. If you get in the power of any kind, anything that you could actually change anything, because it seems like sex scandals seem to be the media's favorite thing of denouncing someone, and it's just so hypocritical. The culture just shows, the American people will sit there, and they'll be doing half the same stuff most of the time. They'll be like, "Oh yeah, that's so wrong right there, what he did," especially like the ones where I mean, they'll go to the point where it's like, "Oh yeah, you took a dick pic and sent it to an intern or whatever." When they literally do that to 17 different women or whatever on Snapchat, and they'll be, yelling, "Oh, that's so wrong, that's nasty," all that stuff. For I just don't, this whole how they fake demonize womanizing, because all these leaders or whatever, what do you think they're doing with all that money? Of course, they're buying, they're buying women, and they participate in prostitution. They participate in a lot sicker stuff than prostitution. The super rich, that stuff like Bilderberg, and then probably what they're doing. That's why I see a rise. It's probably how they get them all to go, partially. All those elites, instead of them just staying around and enjoying their money, those 3 days or whatever. They probably there's probably prostitutes and all kinds of stuff that they partake in, whatever. What else would probably be the Bilderberg Committee? Probably also, of course, there's probably some prostitutes that are definitely underage there. Because these people are sick individuals, especially like the British government. They have these big cases of stuff like this, and they never really get solved, and they just get delayed, and the people that are involved, mysterious circumstances happen. People disappear, people get murdered, that kind of stuff. That try to unveil the horrific things that go on behind the shadows. But ultimately, with JFK, I mean, of course, they tried to discredit him with that, and it wasn't even really his money or power that got him that woman. He just, let's face it, he just had the charm. That's why he had a lot of popular support and was able to gain part of a lot of the support of the American people. Was just that charm that he was able to put on during the speeches and during the debates. I mean, let's not forget that he was the first president to be part of a televised debate. And that's what really won the hearts of the American people. Him doing the little finger pointing towards Nixon, and I think everybody knew in '60 that it was Tricky Dick Nixon, who was very close to the fascist government in Cuba, which later, of course, comes into play because pretty much the exiles of that fascist government were the ones that were saying, "Yeah, we'll have our day, November 22nd," and saying, talking shit. And I don't know if they were just talking shit or were they possibly a part, because there were so many conspirators. It's almost hard to tell who was in it and who wasn't in it. I mean, probably people, was it like literally like they're calling, "Hey, we're going to take out JFK. Would you like to take part in this?" It's like, "Oh, sure, why not?" Probably calling up all these different people, power, maybe even the mafia or whatever. I don't, for some reason, I don't buy the whole mafia. I think that it's possible because he didn't want to support the fascist Cuban government that had allowed the mafia to operate so freely down there. I mean, remember the mafia had all kinds of casinos. Cuba was practically a giant Las Vegas, and let's not forget that places like Las Vegas is and places of decadence like that. It's not all fun stuff. There's not the Flamingo and the whole Las Vegas Strip. It's not the only thing you see. That's just at the eye level. But beyond that, there's all kinds of horrible stuff. Women prostituting themselves out for just a few bucks just so they can eat or feed or even feed their kids. In just horrific stuff. it's like people that glorify the Wild West or whatever are the same people that glorify Las Vegas. It's it looks, yeah, the whole freedom. Oh yeah, we get to do all this cool adult stuff, but at the same time, gambling and even the prostitute. Talk about the escorts or whatever. Yeah, but at the same time, for all those escorts that are on the street, think about why they're escorts is because they're just trying to feed themselves. Yes, sure, there's just regular, there's women that just do that kind of because that's the job they like to do. But for a lot of them, they have no other choice. It's that or starve. And then in Cuba, that definitely was the case. And under the fascist government, many were in severe poverty. There would literally be a casino, and behind the casino there would be slums in Havana before Castro. There was also, they would also, right by the baseball stadium, there would be the spring training would be happening, but they wouldn't be able to attend the games because they were they're still in their slums, just trying to survive. That was just a reality of a lot of South America at the time, as the fascist buildup started in the 50s. It was really just going back from before that, it was just kind of what they called caudillos and strongmen rule the countries, and after that it became, complex fascist governments taking over Paraguay, taking over. That was really the first one. Stroessner took over Paraguay, but there was also Rojas Pinilla. You could say was he was a fascist dictator. They ruled only for a short time, 4 years in Colombia, but then they had an alternating government where the parties that were really ultimately the same, Colombia, the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party, changed power, and they just ruled in a coalition for about 16 for about 16 years or something like that. They ruled in a coalition after Rojas Pinilla. So ultimately, Colombia was an official dictatorship. I mean, I'm pretty sure in most ways that's considered an official dictatorship when you have no choice of who becomes the next leader, really, because it just alternates, and that's how it was practically a fascist dictatorship, an official one until 1974, and it continued on way past that. The corruption, it continues to this day under Santos, and after Uribe into Santos, coming back from there, I've seen they have like 8 different parties, and only one's actually different than any of the rest, because all the other parties. There was the Green Party, Radical Change Party, Party of National Integration, Central, or was it Democratic Center? They all support Santos, and then there's just one party, the Partido Polo, or Alternative Democratic Pole Party, which is slightly. It's kind of like it's similar to the politics of of Jose Mujica or Evo Morales or Nestor Kirchner, and they are they kind of participate in Pink Tide, that whole South American leftist movement, and that's the only party that's different, and they're a pretty small party. I mean, they were a lot bigger, I would say, probably around 2006. They were really just a combination of 2 other parties, but now they've kind of slipped in. They went from having like 10 seats in the House, 10 seats in the Senate, and now they only have a few seats in the House and Senate. So definitely things do not look too good for that party. And looking back from the 60s on, Colombia is one of the few countries actually in South America where things haven't changed for the better. All the other ones, yes, there's been major changes. It seems like, besides Paraguay, has went back from having Stroessner. Now they have Horacio Cortez, who belongs to the same party as Stroessner, and it's arguable that the dictatorship has returned in Paraguay, and that Paraguay might be soon experiencing full fascism. In Colombia, it's possible. I think that things could go either 2 ways. May the left out of nowhere comes in, and gain support like they have been. They've had a lot of momentum the last few months down there in Colombia. But it's possible that it's possible also that the whole ugly thing happens, and they'll say that, oh yeah, the rebels have started attacking again inside of Colombia. We need to declare martial law, and all of a sudden the entire country's on lockdown. Anyways, we're about 1 hour and 40 minutes in the country. I mean, in the show. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit tired here. I'm going this long solo, an hour 40 minutes solo, without going with any dead air. I mean, people that listen and don't do podcasting, don't give me slack because you don't know how hard it is. But the people that do podcasting, then you'll know how hard it is, and you'll cut me some slack because an hour and 40 minutes is not easy. That's where you really start to get the experiences of radio fatigue. I mean, even the people that do 4-hour radios and stuff like that, they don't have one person talking for 4 hours. They have, it's them, their buddies talking for 4 hours. I don't have any of my buddies talking. It's just me. So I know the people that that do radio will cut me some slack. But JFK, Israel, he was actually going to send monitors to the Doha nuclear plant in Israel. However, that was, Ben-Gurion was strongly against that. Ben-Gurion was the ironic thing is that he kind of called himself a socialist almost to an extent. But the truth was that he was a racist. And he supported the super top corporations of Israel, just like how it is to this day. I mean, they have their own military industrial complex, and of course they have their bankers that finance Israel. He's the one that he's the one that oversaw the Rothschilds practically dedicating that country to themselves. The Supreme Court of Israel, the street that the Supreme Court of Israel is on, Rothschild Boulevard. Who was the architect for the Knesset? One of the Rothschilds, in 1949. Where the Knesset is the Israeli parliament. And the Rothschilds, of course, they were all behind. They're all behind Zionism. They're all in favor of the Israeli government. They still are to this day, and they're richer than ever practically right now. The media tries to say, oh yeah, they're not nearly what they were back in the 1800s, but no, that's not true. They are the richest family on the planet, pretty much. But JFK was going to send these people. He was going to pretty much stop. He was pretty much treating Israel like how the United States government treats Iran, upset they had legitimate reason because Israel was actually building nuclear weapons. Iran's not building nuclear weapons, and even if they are, they have justification because Israel's already nuclearly armed, and one of their neighbors, Pakistan, is nuclearly armed, who is generally supportive of the United States. So they're almost like cornered by nuclear superpowers. Well, not superpowers, but nuclear armed states. And they have China to their east as well, which are unpredictable, as we've seen over the last, all throughout the last 65 years of their unpredictability, of them, how they've turned on many of their allies. So of course, it'd be a little scary living next to them, or living next to one of the biggest militaries on the planet. But JFK made clear that he was very against an Israeli nuclear-armed state. Even he made that clear many times, and they were very upset about it. Tensions between Israel and the United States escalated heavily, and the relationship between the United States and Israel fell apart. Israel and the United States had had a strong relationship since Truman in 1948, and then to Eisenhower, and then JFK, the tensions rose heavily, and then of course Johnson was a big apologist for Israel, and the same thing with Nixon and Ford and Carter, and all the way through. Well, Carter actually, he was a supporter of Israel during his presidency, but it seems like afterwards he's taken a very strong stance against Israel. But then Reagan, very strong stance, pro-Israeli, all through, and Obama. People that say Obama is not pro-Israeli and that he's, they criticize him actually for that. They say, oh yeah, he's not sticking up for our ally Israel or whatever. We're not realize that he has sent the most money than any president in American history to Israel. Right now, $15 million a day, I believe, is going straight to Israel. And there's going to be more money even sent in a stipend by the American government of American taxpayer money. It's like something like $80 billion over the next 10 years. That's already put on top of the $5 billion we're sending each year. So that means that's going to be it's not $80 billion, but I think it's like maybe it's like $30 billion. That's how so it's going to be something like over the next 10 years we're going to be sending $8 billion to Israel each year. A thriving country, while our own country can't even build, while our highways are falling apart, while our schools are falling apart, while the whole country collectively, infrastructure of this country and many necessities that this country needs to continue falls apart. But we still have money to send. We have, and also let's not forget that at the same time, with Africa, a country that Israel's havoc was their policy of neocolonialism through the years, while Africa starves. But no one cares about Africa, do they? It's like they had when the Nigeria 2000 terror or 2000 in 2000 people were killed in a terrorist attack. Nobody said a word, but when 150 get killed in Paris, everybody freaks out. Or when hundreds of people die in Russia from terrorist attacks, nobody says a word. But when Paris 120 die, everybody freaks out. Just the hypocrisy of what people consider a tragedy. When any of these terrorist attacks, they're tragedies. Doesn't matter who it happens to. Doesn't it's like, what is it? And how Western the country is. If it's Russia, that's not Western enough. If it's Africa, they're too dark for it to be considered tragedy. Just sick kind of media hypocrisy on that. We only got like about 12 minutes of airtime or so left. We hit the bumper at 10:59 sharp. And we are it's about 10:45 here on the East Coast, so it's actually got 14 minutes left. If anybody wants to leave a last minute comment, please do in the chat room. Nobody's left it. Next time I'll be scrolling through the back by the UCY chat room, and we will be able to talk directly, have comments, because I know that I haven't enabled the lines to be open about, when was it, probably, I know the last time I had the lines open was that show back on, trying to figure out what that was. That was October, it was actually November 1st. Yeah, November 1st was the last time. Was the last time we had the lines open. So it was earlier this month. Then after that show, I know there was kind of a fiasco. Then I didn't have the lines open for November 8th, November 15th. We had the recording last week of a show I did back in May in 2014, and now we're doing this show here about JFK. We just have a few minutes left. And next week's a big surprise. I'm just going to leave it at that. Hopefully a big surprise. Will still be a big surprise. I'll find some way to surprise everybody, even if the show of even if what my original plans don't happen. I just don't want to sit confirm something that is 90% likely to happen, and then that 10% doesn't happen. So that seems to happen to me a lot through radio. Just get unlucky sometimes. I don't know why I have bad luck sometimes here on the radio. Maybe just a bad time slot. I think it's a good time slot. It's like I say that, and I'm probably insulting some of my listeners because they are listening right now. They actually. It's not like people don't tune in to listen at Sunday nights. People are more loyal than that. I mean, that's a little bit inconvenient for some people. And a lot of people, it's very convenient. They're like, they get a little nice dose of truth, and then it's almost 11 o'clock. Maybe they tune in a little show or whatever. Maybe they tune in the next show that's coming up. I don't know. Go to watch a YouTube video and something. I don't know what exactly what my audience does. audience, very diverse. And then they go, and then they go to sleep. I mean, most people have work first shift. I think a lot of people in the trucer community are night owls, and like scrolling through the internet late at night, and that's why they have second shift jobs. A lot of them. Honestly, I prefer a second shift. Not the late second shift. I like the just that just to keep in mind if people that like to they're close to me. They message me. They're probably the next few weeks or so. I'm probably going to be working more, and that means that and then I work second shift when I hope to be working second shift. That means that probably like 3 to 10, 11 or whatever is going to be at work. I never saw a big problem with it. You still have plenty of time before work, and then you still have quite a bit of time after work. I mean, unless you're one of those people who are like, oh my God, it's 1 a.m. Well, something big's going to happen if I don't fall asleep at 1 a.m., No, it's like 1 a.m. is like, might cut off the TV and then watch the 9/11 documentary of 9/11 Inside Job documentary, or maybe watch the Tito documentary or something like that, and slowly doze off to that. I don't know. That's getting a little bit off track, but just a little fun tidbit before I get in a little bit about the actual physics. Now, if you actually believe that, more than the magic bullet, but have you ever, I'm going to go into a little bit of Bill Hicks rant right now. Have you ever actually went to the Texas School Book Depository and seen the scene? This is in the 90s when he was still alive. He was saying is that you look out, there's a big tree blocking the way. So the only way you could literally be so that you could actually take a shot at JFK is that there was a little bit of space to take a shot, but you would have to be literally hanging out the window with your shoes keeping you from falling out 6 stories to the ground. You swing in there with your rifle, take the 3 shots in 8 seconds, and then somehow being superhuman, be able to kill him. Or they said that some anti-Castro birds were saying "coo, coo," and took Oswald out the window and let him take the shot. And then of course he goes on and on about the back back and to the left range. If somebody shoots me from there, that's what would cause me to go and then keep doing the back and to the left movement. Bill Hicks' humor is a little bit dark. And by a little bit dark, I mean quite a lot bit dark, but I don't know. His criticism of just American society in general and the fascist society we became. I mean, he talked quite a bit about the Gulf War. He talked a little bit about Waco. I mean, that was towards the end of his career when he was talking about Waco. He started in the 80s. It was a really short career. I liked all of it. I liked almost all of his material. I even liked his smoking material. I just find it just funny. I mean, I really disagree with smoking because I know it has a horrible health effect, and plus the fact that it just serves super rich corporate tobacco heads, but that the government has allowed to poison, 25% of this population, of the American population, for many years. But I just like to hear his kind of rants about, the other side, people that see cigarette smoke and freak out or whatever, kind of political correctness and talking about talk about JFK a lot. I mean, he also swore a lot. That's true about that. Which was one of the reasons why I liked him, because it's just kind of how he kind of used it, just kind of saying they're just words. People do all these horrible actions, but you don't say a thing. But when somebody drops the F-bomb, all of a sudden everybody freaks out. Like you just, which I can agree with that. People I've seen people just was like gasping. They're like, my virgin ears or whatever. After hearing a curse word, you offend their virgin ears and they start gasping or even start yelling at you or whatever. And I just find that's why I like being on online radio, partially because no FCC to tell you, you say one word and all of a sudden you get fined. And also another thing that it makes it impossible to take out JFK is just the fact that there was all the wounds that were made. There was 3 wounds or something like that made on JFK through the seat, and 3 more wounds on Governor Connolly. So that means that 6 wounds were made with 1 bullet, the magic bullet, of course, which makes more sense would be multiple shooters having taken 6 different shots, which would have actually that's in the movie JFK made by Oliver Stone 91 that was his theory, is that there were 6 different shots taken by multiple shooters. I'm pretty sure that also that the bodyguards were told to stay away from JFK, and then you just see them right after he gets shot, them running towards them. Then the driver belonged to an Irish Protestant right-wing group that was against JFK, probably just by the fact that he was Catholic. He was driving JFK, and he decides after hearing a gunshot, and what I think, they say, oh, they might have just saw the firecracker in celebration. It's like, why would there be, who would be in the security detail would do something that's stupid, make something that could be that could be a gun, that would sound like a gunshot, but you wouldn't know. There shouldn't be any firecrackers in be allowed, because it's too easily undistinguishable when you hear it to a gunshot. But anyways, they say it was thought it was a firecracker, so he just keeps slowing around. He actually slows down, doesn't just keep cruising, but slows down to 11 miles an hour and lets JFK get popped in the head, which actually made probably the shot from wherever it came from possible by the fact that he was only going 11 miles an hour. Then, there was actually just 15 minutes before, to point out, somebody had a seizure, allowing the police to be caught off guard, which is believed possibly, according to also the movie JFK, I'm going by, is by his theories that's when the shooters moved into place, assembled their weapons. It's believed that they disassembled their weapons, but Oswald, being the patsy, left his weapon, and that was the plan, was for Oswald to be blamed for the shooting as he worked with the government to take out JFK. There's H.W. Bush is seen in Dallas the same day. Oswald just happens to go into a theater and get caught. If he actually was a legitimate shooter, you think he'd be running to Mexico or something like that. No, he goes to the theater. Some say that, I think that possibly what Oswald was doing, I think that he just was very down at what just happened. I think that from many different accounts, including accounts from people around the FBI, that Oswald was a person actually legitimately defending JFK, and all of a sudden, people around him started shooting JFK, and he was put as the patsy. There was nothing he could do. JFK was killed under his watch. He was blamed, and he just went to the theater. Also, it could have been a place where he was meeting with the other government agents. That's 2 different theories on that. And the last thing to conclude the show is that if you still believe to this point that there was no reason for it, well, now you listen to this show, you should definitely change your mind. Plus, listen to all the different YouTube videos and just all the documentaries and all the articles. And after that, fascism completely took over the United States. They already had taken over, but it retook over the United States. JFK was the last one to legitimately oppose fascism, and he was taken out. He legitimately opposed the Federal Reserve and legitimately opposed the Zionists. And now the only thing we can look at this point, we can look back at what happened and just take it.
Running no return and nobody can stop it. Malcolm Little when he knelt before Elijah Muhammad that commented, kill the dinosaurs, changing the earth. They love to criticize, they always say I changed for the worse. Like prescription pills when you misusing them, nigga. The Templar Knights when they took Jerusalem, nigga, and figured out what was buried under Solomon's temple, Al-Aqsa. The name is not coincidental. I know too much, the government is trying to murder me. No coming back like cutting your wrists open vertically. How could the serpent be purposely put in charge of the country? country. Genetic engineered sickness spread amongst me. My people are so hungry that they attack without reason, like a fucking dog ripping off the hand that feeds them. Immortal technique is treason to the Patriot Act. So come and get me, motherfucker, cause I'm not coming back. This is the point from which I can never return. And